Well, I say that it took our family 100 years to travel 1 mile because my grandfather came to the United States in the late 1800s and worked as a servant for a family in the state capital, Olympia, Washington, washing dishes, sweeping floors, doing the laundry in exchange for English lessons. Of course, like many of the early Chinese immigrants, he would send money back to his family, to the village in Taishan, Guangdong province. And then later on, he went back to the village, got married, had some children. So my father was born in China. But then he would leave the family in China and he would come back, my grandfather would come back to the United States to work and then send money back to the village to support the family. And eventually, grandfather went back to China, brought the whole family over. So my father came to the United States when he was around 12 or 13 years old, along with my aunts and uncles. And I was joking that here it is in 1997. I'm being sworn in as governor of the state of Washington, and I am moving into the governor's mansion, a huge house. But it's exactly 1 mile from where my grandfather washed dishes and swept floors. So I was joking that it took our family 100 years to move that 1 mile from the house where grandfather worked to the house where the governor sits. And I also say that's the story of America. Well, when I first entered public office as a state legislator or assemblyman, I never thought I would run for governor. I never thought that the opportunity would ever arise. But as I got more involved in government, I learned about some of the great governors of the state of Washington. And when I was in the legislature, I was passing the laws. But I know that I realized that you can pass a law, but if the administration, if the agencies don't like the law, they don't have to do a very good job. And how they implement and how they carry out the law can make the difference between success and failure. So I pretty soon decided that I wanted to be in management to help control how things operate. And so one day when the governor of the state of Washington announced that he was not going to seek a second term, my wife and I met with some friends and we decided that, oh, this would be a good time in our life to run for governor. Heading up the Commerce Department, it's focusing on trade. That's something that I always have focused on as governor, as King County executive. But now, instead of promoting exports of Washington state products, I'm promoting exports of all American products and services. I'm also trying to run other agencies, like the Weather Service is part of the Commerce Department. Also NOAA, which manages our oceans and our fisheries. That's part of the Commerce Department. We also have a scientific laboratory, a National Institute of Standards and Technology, and that we have several Nobel Prize winners who work for that agency. That's part of the Commerce Department. Also the 2010 census. And I'm very proud that that was a very troubled project when I took over as Commerce Secretary. A lot of the government accounting groups, congressional groups, as well as Inspector General's reports said it was the most troubled federal project at the time. And yet we brought it in on time. We brought it in with the highest participation rate of the American people in many decades. And we brought it in 25% under budget, saving the taxpayers almost $2 billion. Well, Ambassador Huntsman suddenly resigned as ambassador to China because he wanted to challenge President Obama for presidency of the United States. And President Obama, at a meeting, came to me and said, "Gary, you've been a fantastic manager at the Commerce Department, but I need someone that I can really trust, who will be loyal to me, and as ambassador to China." And he said, "It's the most important relationship that the United States has in the world today." I'm very proud of the fact that we've enhanced people-to-people exchanges, especially through my work speeding up the visa process. When I first arrived in Beijing, the Chinese people had to wait 70 to 100 days just to get an interview. I said that was absolutely unacceptable. It discourages the Chinese business people or tourists from coming to the United States. And within a month and a half, we reduced it down to 5 days. And then for the 2.5 years after that, even though the demand for visas was growing by 70%, the wait time for an interview was reduced and kept at 3 to 5 days. And then, of course, as soon as I got to China, I said, why do we only give the Chinese a one-year visa is because the Chinese will only give Americans a one-year visa. So I talked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and said, we need to have longer visas. Yeah. So we started that process, and I'm glad to say that President Obama recently announced that we would be giving the Chinese a 10-year visa. Well, I think early on the Chinese government did ask us to not publish the information, but we said that we had to because we had a duty to all Americans living in Beijing. Because at first we broadcast only the information about Beijing, because our first monitoring system was on top of the U.S. Embassy in Beijing. And so we were using that information for the employees of the embassy. But again, U.S. law says if you know information about health and safety of the embassy employees, you have to share it with all Americans living in that city. The only way to do that is to do it over the internet. And so, no, we did not anticipate how the public would react. We didn't know that bloggers would use Weibo to retweet and spread the information all across Beijing. And then, of course, we had that one period of time, I think about 4 or 5 days, in which the PM 2.5 was over 900. And so that's when the Chinese government newspaper said, yes, this is not fog, this is pollution. We have to do something. The government has to do something about it. So we were very pleased, very gratified that the people were now demanding action. And even though, the Chinese government said they were not going to broadcast and reveal the PM 2.5 for several more years, the Chinese government changed their mind and started revealing the PM 2.5 and telling the Chinese people themselves. Yeah, we knew this was going to be very controversial, but the decision was made, and we thought we believed it was on proper humanitarian grounds. We knew that there would be repercussions. We knew the Chinese government would not be pleased and would not be happy. But we were prepared for that, and because this is what America stands for.
How angry was the Cui Diankai when you make the negotiation with them, though?
Well, I mean, the negotiations were difficult, but very professional.
Yes.
And the Chinese had their very strong viewpoints, and we also had our viewpoints about making sure that Mr. Chen Guangcheng's rights were being observed. But ultimately, it was Mr. Chen Guangcheng who had the final decision on whether to leave the embassy. It was his decision. We did not force him out.
But he has many complaints right now.
Well, I have not read his book, yes. But I can tell you that at one point when
he said he was abandoned by.
No, let me just finish. At one point when he was not happy with the offer by the Chinese government, and he was rejecting their proposal, we stood by him and we said, okay, then we're going to make preparations for you to live here for the next several years. So we were never trying to kick him out. Our viewpoint was, unless he was satisfied, unless he was completely satisfied with the conditions by which he would leave the embassy, and unless he was completely satisfied with the assurances and the promises made by the Chinese government, he did not have to leave the embassy. And in fact, at one point, when he was not happy with what the Chinese government was proposing, we were preparing to have him stay and making preparations for him to stay for, if necessary, several years at the embassy. Well, it was very tense moments in my career, because we had a person who wanted who had come into the embassy and wanting protection, but there's no way that what a lot of people don't understand is that you cannot be granted asylum in another country unless you are first outside of your native country. I mean, if you're a Russian general and you want to defect to the United States, you have to do that outside of Russia. If you walk into the U.S. Embassy in Moscow and say, I'm a general and I have all these secrets about nuclear arms and things like that, and you want to defect to the United States, we can't get you out of Russia. Because if we put you in a car to go to the airport, as soon as we drive out of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, the Russian police can stop you.
But
if we put you on an airplane, a United Airlines airplane in the Moscow airport, the Russians can stop the airplane from taking off. So you cannot, if you want to defect, you have to, visit France or some other country and then go to the U.S. Embassy.
Are you saying that the only reason why the U.S. could not give Wang Lijun asylum status was because of this practical reason?
I'm just saying that's one factor. I mean, a lot of people don't understand that. Another thing is that he was a person that had a very controversial background in terms of his own policies and his own treatment of people. So I'm not even sure that if it ever gotten to that point, whether or not he would have been a candidate for asylum in the United States. But I'm just saying he wasn't even at step one because he was still in China at the time.
Then my question is, do the United States government knew about what's going to happen? Or how much the information that he's holding that's going to cause all this problem?
Well, we had discussions with Mr. Wang Lijun, and what those discussions were, I can't really say.
Okay. It's pretty sensitive, though. I can say that, all right? Let me just finish one. And the information that you have and discussion you have is still going to be in the future or in the next 2 or 3 years going to cause more trouble or more internal struggle, political struggle within the Communist Party. Can we say that?
Well, I have no idea what will happen with the Communist Party or the Chinese government over the next several years based on what Wang Lijun said to the Chinese government. And so those are all internal affairs of the Chinese government, and how to predict what's going to happen based on what he told them without us knowing what he told them is hard for us to speculate on. Well, actually, I'm very honored and very proud and touched by how the Chinese people responded to that Chinese newspaper editorial. And in fact, it was taken down within a few days because so many Chinese people felt ashamed and embarrassed by that article. And I can tell you that the Chinese government officials treated me very, very warmly and with great hospitality. And I'm very, very proud of the friendships that I've made with the Chinese government officials, all the way from the mayors all the way up to the central government. And so that was part of the propaganda department that came out with the article, but the Chinese people were offended by it, and I saw some of the Weibo comments attacking that article, and in fact within a few days that article was taken down. We would have liked to have stayed in China longer. In fact, my son wanted to graduate from high school in China and stay 4 more years. But if we had brought my daughter back to the United States just for her last year of high school, in September, starting in September of her last year. College applications have to be submitted starting in October. That only gives the teachers 1 month to write a letter of recommendation. And if she's in a brand new school and doesn't know the teachers, it's very difficult for the teachers to write a good letter of recommendation if they've only known her for 1 month. So the decision was made that we really need to have her back in the United States for her last 2 years of high school. And so the family moved back 6 months before I did. But the decision was actually made even well before that. Most ambassadors only serve 2 to 3 years. So I actually served 2.5 years. Ambassador Huntsman only served 1.5 years. And the typical diplomat, throughout all of our diplomats in the embassy, can only be there for a maximum of 3 years. They rotate every 3 years. And so, but let me just say that it was a great experience for our entire family. We loved it. And the Chinese people were so warm and friendly to us throughout all of China. And I'm really proud that my children had an opportunity to discover and learn of the China of their ancestors, the land of their grandfather and great-grandfathers. It was always an issue that was discussed between the U.S. and Chinese government, but the U.S. position is very, very clear. While we support one China and recognize one China, nonetheless, we have obligations to Taiwan, and we intend to honor those. And we are very pleased with the growing economic and political exchanges and relationship between the mainland and Taiwan. We hope that those will continue. Obviously, there's very strong economic ties between the two entities, and we expect that and hope that that will continue. We also note that there's more contact of people, more direct flights between the mainland and the island, and also the more exchanges of political leaders as well. So those are all good signs. But we believe that the issue is to be resolved between the people of Taiwan and the people of People's Republic of China. Barack Obama broke the glass ceiling as the first minority person to become president of the United States. I never thought that I would see that in my lifetime, and I was just so touched and overwhelmed when he won the presidency. I'm looking forward to Hillary Clinton becoming a female president of the United States
so
to again break history.
You will heavily involve.
I will be heavily involved in her campaign.
To what capacity other than your national co-chairperson?
Well, I don't know what.
Have you talked to the Hillary?
Not yet,
campaign?
not yet. I've talked to some of their people, but they've not asked me to take on any specific role. I'll do whatever they ask me to do because I want her to win, and I believe in her.
If she wins, would you consider joining the cabinet?
I don't know. I'm very happily retired and working out of Seattle, my home. I love Seattle, Washington. We had a great experience here in Washington, D.C. We made a lot of friends. It was a great experience, and serving in President Obama's cabinet, working alongside Hillary Clinton as well. And I'm very proud of what we were able to accomplish for the American people and with President Obama. And I will help Hillary Clinton any way I can.